All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the sales Q&A. So we're live. It's 1 p.m. UK time, 8 a.m. EST, and we're in the middle of what is either a hurricane or a storm called Doris. So you might be able to hear it outside. Hopefully it's not too loud, but it is. At the moment, there's stuff flying about past the window, so hopefully I'm not going to lose any roof tiles off the house, and it's pretty windy out there. Wow, well, I mean, I don't think I've had quite so many questions as I did in the last 24 hours, so thanks very much to everyone who's sent those through. Today's session is focused on rapport building. And basically, this is one of the most essential parts of getting a sale, simply because it happens at the beginning. Often a lot of calls and meetings are unsolicited, so you're going in cold with someone who doesn't know you, and creating a receptiveness with the person you're engaging with is so essential, because it's the reason why they're going to continue to listen to you and then hear out your pitch, or they're not going to bother. So it's a case of getting this right means you actually get your shot at goal, so to speak. So we've got a huge amount of questions being fired over here. Thanks very much to everyone who sent them. I think the best thing to say is, if you want to add questions in the comments, do so. I'm going to just try and get through as many as I can while my voice holds out, because I've got a bit of a sore throat again. I get them all the time because I do a lot of talking each day, I suppose. But let's start off. So first off, the first question from Jay Galvin. Thanks so much for sending yours. He writes, Richard, how do I consistently bridge the business and personal gap so I speak business with a personal touch or feel? This is actually a really good question, because if you have been, under a rock for the past million years, you won't know, you won't know. But the thing is that people buy personality and they buy people. You really generally tend to find that someone's going to buy your service if you resonate with them, if you have a connection. And that doesn't have to necessarily be face to face. If you're selling a product even through an ad funnel or something online, the fact is it still has to resonate, it has a good vibe about it, and that person really buys into that kind of personality. So it's essential, and it's true that you'll sell more if someone gets on with you on a personal level. You'll sell less if you're almost too corporate, businessy or professional. The kind of PowerPoint presentation formality that comes with, presenting to a board in a board meeting. There's not really so much of a place for that when it comes to sales. And I've done very high-end formal sales, and it's really essential to make sure that you are still having that human or personal touch as well. Bradley Gray, thanks very much for joining. Always start the day off right when I get to watch you live. That's really kind, mate. Thanks for posting that. So let's answer this question. When it comes to consistently bridging the personal and business gap, you need to understand, as I mentioned before, that there are two types of rapport. One is business and one is personal. So essentially the business level rapport is building a connection with someone by telling them things of business level or practical level value, whereas with emotional rapport building, you're building it on a human level, and that's getting on, having a chat, having stuff in common. You're both dog lovers, or you both watch the football at the weekend, or whatever it might be. You have something that connects and resonates on that level. Maybe you crack a joke and they thought it was funny, you know what I mean? So it's creating that kind of emotional level. What we all crave is the emotional rapport, but it's less effective to do that at the beginning with a cold prospect, because they're like, who are you? What are you doing? Why are you being so friendly? What are you trying to sell me? And then the barriers all come up, and then all the cynicism tends to come out. So if you focus more on early practical rapport building, you create a platform for them to go, okay, I'll listen. This sounds interesting. This is helping build some value. And then it gives you a platform for, your emotional rapport to be built on top of that. One thing I would say though, Jay, is that you've got to do your research. I've always found that if I'm going to approach someone, certainly in a business meeting, if I know about them, if I've done the research, chuck him in LinkedIn, everyone's there. Chuck him onto Facebook, everyone's there. I've got a meeting later today with someone I've never met before, all right? But I know all about him, or at least I can make good judgments on them, simply because I've checked him out already on Facebook. I've checked out loads of other stuff about them. And look, you are who Google says you are, and it tends to be fairly true. And so what I would say is, if you do a bit of research, work out who it is you're really talking to. Even if it's out of nowhere and you're having a chat with them, bring them up on Facebook anyway, and you can catch up a few details with them. So Jay, hopefully that answers your question. I saw you just joined in there. But basically, you need to focus on making sure there's practical steps. don't do too much of a stalk, but find out a few things about them and focus on then building the personal level of rapport after that. You tend to find giving practical value first gets someone interested, and then you've earned the right almost to give the personal level and emotional level. Switch it the other way around and they'll just think you're a bit weird and they're like, what are you calling for? Then you have to backtrack and go to the practical anyway. It's a little more slick, that approach, and then it allows you to be more human, which is obviously what we all crave, and it looks like you get more sales that way. So hopefully that helps a bit with your question. The next one here is from Ben Allen. He says, Richard, can you go over how to quickly place someone on the PACE scale, PASE, how to quickly assess their dominant personality and leverage that? So those of you who aren't aware, I can't remember who did it originally, but there's a number of people who have kind of taken what's known as personality typing. So there are different types of people in terms of your personality outwardly, how you think, how you act, and they've made different models for it. One of them that's well known is the PACE model. I can't remember what the original one was, but it's basically based on that. But anyway, the PACE model is the one that's quite prevalent, people know about, which is practical, action, social, or emotional. These are 4 different personality types. Now, you're not one and not the others. You're basically all 4 of them, but in different measures. And essentially, the practical type is, as you'd imagine, someone who's quite logical. They do spreadsheets. They're the kind of person that weighs up practical arguments ahead of making decisions on things. Action is the kind of person who is less focused on detail in the main. They are more focused on taking action and moving. These are the kind of people who are always doing things. They're always starting things, and they're always keen to get on and make decisions. So they're always good fun to work with. Social are the ones who want to chat. They have a certain way of talking. They always want to say, talk about what other people are doing in their space, and talking with them on a kind of a people level, bringing in other examples of peers or people they can relate to is a great way of getting conversation going with them. And emotional personality types are the ones who talk a little bit more with the senses. They talk about how they feel all the time. They share their language often is very descriptive, and they paint a picture of what's going on in their heads and things like that. But the bottom line is you can learn all day long about the PASE personality types. The question here is, how do you quickly place someone on that scale? And there's no better way than to just simply get them talking. So the first thing I do when I have a business meeting, for instance, whenever I meet a new client, if I'm meeting them in London, so I'm face to face with someone, first thing I'll do is say, hey, how's it going? And, great that we can have this time together. We've got an hour or whatever it is. And first thing I'm doing is basically encouraging them to talk about themselves. So I'll say something like, so give me a bit of background. How is it that you got here? What have you done in the last couple of years or so to get yourself here? And I sit back. I encourage them. I acknowledge what they're saying. I'm like, okay, all right, that's interesting. I might take notes and things like that. But all the while, what I'm trying to do is encourage that person to speak. Of course, the content of what they're telling me is of value here. I can use that later on. But more importantly is sensing, and it's hard to kind of put this down, but there's an inner part of your brain, the limbic brain, that is able to tune right in and assess and analyze the type of personality you're speaking with. And you will just be able to tell if that person is more of a practical or logical personality type, or if perhaps they're more of an emotional type, just because of how they come across. The short way of looking at it is this: a guy who speaks fast, like all the time, talking about what he's doing and how he's been doing this, they're action personality types. Ones who are a little bit more slow or measured, they tend to be more the practical types. They give shorter answers as well. They're much more measured, as I say, in how they describe things. There's almost a filter often before they go ahead and speak. More on the social side, they chat loads, they talk so much you almost don't get to the point of what you're talking about in terms of your business approach, because they just want to chat. And these are the people where you can almost just say, you can just get on with them and have a nice chat and bond and connect, and then say, so why don't we do this then? And I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. And they want to just be friends, and they talk about how other people have worked with them. And the emotional side, of course, that, as I say, they will spend time with imagery, verbal imagery rather, talking about what their world looks like, and you can sense, as I say, you know, the way they talk is talking about feelings and things like that. So probe them more with questions. When they say something, you should drill down. So ask a couple more questions. Oh, really? That's interesting. Well, how about this part of it though? And why is it you say that? And why do you think that is? And so on. Get them talking as much as possible. That's the best way. Don't look at dress. Don't look at how they're dressed up. You know, don't look at how they shook your hand. I think that's a bit too nuanced. It's a little bit more simplistic, just to let them talk, you know, and then you get a real feel for who they are. And it's amazing because every week when I meet new people, if I just get them talking, I know that when it's my turn to talk, I can just tune straight in because I have a sense, my brain's making judgments because I've met enough people by this age, right, as so have you guys, that you can just make judgments on how you need to act with that person. If you're speaking to someone and they're very dry, they're very measured, they speak one-word answers and things like that, they're really kind of held back, you're not going to go hyperactive on them. They will, you know, you'll naturally match their personality type in. So don't try and overthink this too much, but do look out for the type of person they are, and that needs to then have a bearing on how you start presenting. This is the important part, which is, just as an example, if someone is more practical or logical personality typing, you don't want to be too flowery. You kind of want to give them facts and figures and get to the point. Whereas with with action people, you want to focus much more on essential stuff like, you know, how we're going to be moving forward and so on. Max, thanks so much for joining. In the subject, you should hopefully see it says we're talking about rapport building today. So any questions on that, let's have them on the comments. But yeah, quite a few from you guys. Ben, hopefully that answers your question. Thanks so much for sending that. Hamza Larousi has written, how do you tailor your pitch to the audience? Look, before you ever pitch anyone, you've got to make sure you're thinking about who your audience is. You have to do it. I mean, on Friday last week, right, I was in Edinburgh, the University of Edinburgh, and I was speaking to their entrepreneurship society. And whilst there was a guy at Ben Liang, who's one of my followers here, he actually turned up, he'd driven across Scotland to get there. You know, the guy's 27, but in the main, most of these students who were attending in the entrepreneurship society, they're like in their 20s, they're in their early 20s. So there's a certain type of person, that's a 20-year-old who's an intelligent academic, because University of Edinburgh is a very high-end university, and these people were entrepreneurial, so they were the kind of people who had ideas and they wanted to grow, and they had a sense of, you know, I'm going to achieve something beyond just being here for my degree. Their judgments I made, but they're pretty accurate because they're based on stereotypes and they tend to ring true, you see. Whereas, for instance, if I go to a board meeting, which I sometimes do, where you have guys who are in their 50s, for one of the businesses I work with, it's a very different kettle of fish, and you know they're not there to talk about their Twitter account so much. They're there to talk a bit more about P&L, and you know it's all kind of obvious. And what it means is that I understand my audience, and I've spent even a modicum of time just looking at who it is I'm really going to be connecting with. If it comes down to your sales approach with your pitch and your funnels or your adverts, whatever it is, you need to be thinking, well, who does my business represent in terms of the people I'm trying to engage with? What are their hobbies? What are their interests? What do they normally do? What kind of groups would they be in on Facebook? What are their feelings like? There's a really good chapter in Start With Why, the book by Simon Sinek, when he talks about, you know, what I mentioned a moment ago, the limbic brain, and the fact that people really will connect more on a feeling based, and they will make decisions based on that. You need to be thinking to yourself, what are these guys, what are these people that are potentially my audience who might buy my service? What actually is their kind of vibe? What do they feel when they look at this kind of product? What is it that they really want? And then it will kind of reveal itself, the way you need to approach them, and your pitch becomes a lot more straightforward when you know the type of person you're speaking to. I often remember this from many, many years ago when I was selling internet marketing like 10, 12 years ago. I would be calling CEOs, and there tends to be a stereotype for each country, and there tends to be a stereotype for each job title. So if, for instance, I had a managing director or no, a finance director, let's say, in Finland, you tend to find that these people are very logical, practical, focused people. Same with managing directors in Germany, very, very direct, bullet pointy kind of words. That's not always the case, but that tends to be ring true most of the time. So I would speak to them in a certain way. Then if, for instance, as another extreme, if you look at someone, for instance, a marketing director or communications lead in the States, you tend to find they're a little bit more effusive in the way they talk. So just think that stereotypes are kind of handy because they tend to be true, but look at your audience, what kind of person they're going to be, because you need to perhaps change slightly your language. This doesn't mean being different or lying about who you are or masking anything, but you might need to think about changing your language, your delivery, or indeed the kind of things you're talking about, the specific areas, in order to tune into that person. Bottom line is this: if you're pitching a managing director, you should be talking about their bottom line and what kind of returns on investment they get. If you're going to talk to a finance guy, they need those kind of details that focus on the finance side. Tell them about how wonderful their branding is going to be, or something isn't going to be as effective as talking about where the returns are going to come from and how they can be projected and what it will cost them and so on and so forth. So with each type of person you speak to, they will have a different agenda, even if your product or service remains the same. That may be a constant, but what you weight or lean on or talk about more is different based on the audience itself. So to answer that directly, Hamza, you've got to think first, who is the audience? What are they going to be like? The more you can geek up and tune into that, the better position you're going to be in to actually tailor your pitch to the audience, okay? So tell them what they want to hear, what they're going to want to hear, and how they're going to want to hear it is really important. Not what you... Don't just pitch to yourself, is what I'm saying. Okay, next question is Daniel Nunes. Thanks so much for sending another one. I think, Daniel, you're turning up every week, which is wonderful with the new questions, so I really appreciate it. You've written, Richard, how do you refrain from getting stuck in personal development and daydreaming? I don't know if this is entirely based on rapport building, but I'll answer it anyway. Look, if you're spending your time focusing more on development, like I don't know, watching YouTube videos or reading books and things like that, or if you're spending your time daydreaming, looking out the window, thinking about the future, if you've got pictures of a supercar on your wall and you're just looking at it, hoping that looking at it enough will get you it, what it means is the outcome, the thing you're after, right? And I'm not talking about money here, I'm talking about what money represents to you. So if closing a deal means $20,000 worth of revenue for you, that doesn't mean that your focus, your outcome is $20,000. It's what that can buy you, what that can represent. And I'm talking then about, a deposit on a house or investing more into your own business or a holiday or whatever it might be. When you have a real clarity on the outcome that you're genuinely interested in getting, and again, bring in Simon Sinek, you have got a real why. So you've got a mission here. It's like, I need genuinely, with passion and feeling, to achieve this thing. It means a lot to me. May not be anyone else. It may be totally shallow and materialistic, but it means a lot to me to achieve this particular outcome. If that's compelling enough, you will feel driven to do what you need to do to get to act on the things that are associated with that outcome. So this morning I had about an hour this morning when I was really under the bonnet, running through the nuts and bolts of a sales funnel for one of the products I've got. And it was like, oh man, this is like clicking on, like mucking about with domain names and stuff like that. And it's just not my, I'm not a operations technical kind of guy, but that kind of thing needed doing, and I needed to do it right away. But I had associated or attached the outcome, which is getting the results I need from that particular sales funnel and what that then represents in terms of reinvestment to my business, to the task I actually had in front of me. Daydreaming? Are you absolutely serious? It wasn't that I was so super hyperactive about this particular task. It was about the outcome that achieving or completing the task actually represented. That was the reason why sitting about watching videos or reading books was the last thing on my mind, even though it's very seductive. I suppose what I'm saying here for you, Daniel, is if someone is deciding to daydream or to read a book when it's their prime time, when it's their peak hours, when they could be really doing something that is progressive and action based and moving their company forward. It simply means that at that moment, daydreaming and personal development is more compelling than the outcome of the task they actually need to be doing. Okay, and so you've got to take a moment and say, why am I actually here? Why is daydreaming the most important thing to me right now? And sometimes you just got to have a moment and realign yourself and say, do you know what? I've just forgotten why I'm really here. And why I'm really here is these great things that I set out to achieve, 18 months ago or whatever it is. And I'm so close. And if I can just close off or finish this objective, that's going to really make a big difference. And it's things like that that made me, day in, day out, 15 years ago, hammer away and dial numbers on the phone. And then when they weren't there, or I got rejection, calling the next guy, or going out for a meeting, or speaking to someone and saying, do you know what, I can be in your office tomorrow, let's have a coffee, let's just do it. And you know what, and I was like, if you take away the outcome and the need and the desire to do it, it's like, oh man, I can't be bothered. Humans are inherently lazy. I want to sit about and watch YouTube. And back then I had a PlayStation, but right now it's different. It's a case of, look, I want to achieve major things, and if you want to achieve those things, then you need to attach the relevant tasks to them. They're compelling enough, you certainly won't be daydreaming, you'll suddenly feel there just isn't enough time. My favourite book of all time, I've probably been reading it 7 or 8 years now, is The Shortness of Life by Seneca. If you pick that up and read it, you won't finish it, by the way, because you'll be about 2 chapters in and you'll get it. You'll realise time is too short, there's so many amazing things you can achieve. And you'll be like, let me just get on with it. Time's so short, I can't even finish this book, I need to get on and make something happen. So I really think that's powerful stuff, but you need to achieve, you need to associate the real outcome of what your mission is to the task you've got in front of you. Daydreaming then becomes a joke. It's hilarious that people would even do it, because you start realising that what you've got in front of you can mean so much more. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Next question up is Marielle Laguerre. I think you're online here, Marielle. Thanks very much for tuning in as well. So you've asked, and by the way, I've pared back your question slightly just so it's short enough for this. But you said I'm attending a high profile event tomorrow. That's today, I think, so good luck with it. With lots of potential clients in the room. How do you advise a transition from the informal getting to know you chat to asking about potentially doing business together? Yeah, I mean, when it comes to rapport, this is it. This is what it's about, okay? There's a really important thing to bear in mind whenever you speak to anyone. Forget business for a moment, just to anyone, even in a social situation. And that's the answer to the question, so what is it you do? Now, when you say something that's not very interesting, people are like, oh, okay, that's it. And what you've done is you've just set the tone for the conversation. So, if I was to say, look, I'm a salesperson, it's a bit of a turn off, or it's not particularly exciting, it's not something new. And what happens is that I'm faced then with this new prospect who's like, it's not really exciting what you're doing. So what you need to do first and foremost is think, what is it that I actually do, and how can I make that sound really cool? What can I draw out of this that's really exciting? Joe Gilani, who's just joined here, I've just seen that you've hooked on, Joe. Hi, and thanks very much for taking the call. We're catching up a bit later on tomorrow, today, is it tomorrow? No, tomorrow. What is really important, if you look at Joe Gilani here, you should check him out. He's a connector. Okay. Now, it would be straightforward if someone says to Joe here, what is it that you do? And he said, I'm a sales guy, or I'm a networker, or I'm an entrepreneur, or something like that. It's kind of interesting, but if he was to say, a bit more juice about it, well, I connect people in a network to facilitate big things happening in business, or whatever it is that he really is that he does surrounding the connections. That's what he does best. He has this great network around the world and he connects people all together. It's something that's as a talking point, and in the words of Seth Godin, it's remarkable. It's something worth remarking on. And what you're doing is you're setting out your stall early on in this conversation when you're building rapport, and you're saying, this is what I do, without showing off or any kind of ego, and they're going to say, wow, that sounds really interesting. Tell me more about that. And the greatest example is my wife. My wife runs a cake decorating bakery, and she used to be a lawyer, a corporate lawyer in London. And whenever someone said to her, so what is it you do? She said, oh, I'm a lawyer. And unless she was speaking with other lawyers, that it wasn't really so interesting for them. More so when she became a mum, she decided she wanted to stay at home and look after her children. Great. But when she says to people, yeah, I'm a stay-at-home mum, they're like, all right, okay. And in the main, people aren't like, oh wow, that's a really great job you've got there. But now when she mentions that she's got this cake decorating business and she's getting all this acclaim, people are like, wow, that's really cool, because all I ever do is talk to people who are lawyers or accountants or salespeople, and there's nothing wrong with those professions, but they're not dressed up in a way that's exciting. So Marielle, you've dropped in there what you do. I help entrepreneurs build powerful brands to increase their presence in the media. Much better, absolutely. So this is the kind of thing you want to open with. When you're standing there with your orange juice, because you're not going to be drinking, I'm sure, when this is a networking event that you're at later today, and you first engage with people, hi, how are you doing? Of course you go with them first. So what is it you do here? Why are you here? Get the conversation moving and ask them what it is they do. And when they return with the same, give them something juicy like that. I help entrepreneurs build powerful brands. You can drop in the fact, because Marielle's worked with the likes of Forbes and Huffington Post and Boss Babe and some really amazing brands as a contributor there. This is the kind of stuff that's a talking point. And the amazing thing is that we meet many people, but many of them aren't particularly interesting, or at least they don't deliver something that's interesting about themselves. So when you stand out, they're going to want to talk to you. So how is this practical for your question, Marielle? Well, you're asking here, how do I transition from the informal getting to know you to chat about asking about potentially doing business together? Well, hopefully you can see, if you position yourself as someone who's interesting, what naturally happens is, as a human being, forget the professional that person you're speaking to represents, but as a human being, they will warm to you and want to be in your orbit, right? And as a result, you tend to find that they will want to seek ways to work with you. And it's not on a practical, rational level, with the greatest respect, it will be on a human connection level. And the bottom line is this: I really like this person, I really rate them, I really think they're great at what they do. And so, for instance, if I had a client who needed Marielle's services, I know her quite well, it might be that she's the greatest person in the world at what she does. It might be that she's not. But if I buy into her, okay, more than anyone else, because I've got a great connection with her, I'm more inclined to want to sell her to my clients, or say, you should work together or connect them, and so on. And so bottom line is this: if you position yourself as someone who is interesting, they're going to want to be, as I say, in your orbit, in your ecosystem, which basically frames things perfectly for you to then talk about what you could do, what you could do moving forward. Always have a follow-up or an action as well, just as more practical steps. Say, we should talk some more, show a little interest. If you want to do business together long term, well, you need to be saying, what is it you're doing here at this meeting? Or what is it you're looking for? What things are you going to try and do in the next year or so? And, I work in branding, but what is it? I'm just interested in what people like you are actually looking for. Make it out to be a bit like a survey as opposed to a direct pitch, and people are more likely to want to answer then. That can help. Joe, you fired up a point here. I empower entrepreneurs by connecting them with the people that can add the most value towards them achieving their goals. If you said that to someone who said, so what is it you do, who might be just expecting, I just work in accounts, or I work in a customer service role, something like that. They could both describe what you've just said, but when you say that, like that, what happens, like, oh wow, what do you mean by that? Give me a bit more interest. Give me a bit more detail on that. Well, here's an example. So what you do is you say something great, they say, oh, that sounds good. Then you give them an example. A great example actually is this guy who did this, and I did this, and then this happened. And so give them some real world examples. And that's how people will want to warm to you, because you're different and you're interesting and you're noteworthy. Being noteworthy or remarkable is the thing that really is going to leverage a sale. more than your proposition. I promise you this. I've been a student of sales for 15 years. I've sold millions of pounds of sales to hundreds of thousands, different phone calls and meetings, things like that. And the fact is always the same. You can have an average product. I tend to have good products, right? But you can have an average product. You could have a more expensive product. But the bottom line is, if they love you and get on with you and connect with you, and they love you enough, they're going to buy your product. It's as simple as that. Okay, so it's the human thing. Hopefully that helps, Marielle, and glad it was useful advice. Let's move on, because mad amount of questions. If you have any more questions, guys, stick them in the comments. So Matthias Hahn is asked, are there some kind of indicators to tell you that you've built up enough rapport and that you should move on to the next step in the sales process? Yeah, well, great question, because ultimately what we need to know is well, what's the point of the rapport? Well, it's to leverage the next step in the sales cycle. Yeah, of course there are indicators. All of the indicators come from the person you're pitching. So let's say it's a live call, or maybe I'm meeting someone face to face, for instance, because that's topical right now. Moving forward to the next step of the sales cycle is typically done when people are scripted, when they just get to that point and they go, okay, now let me take you to this point. It is better to work in a way that it appears you're accommodating the terms or the way that the buyer would want to work, which is when it feels natural for them to move to the next stage, they're going to be more inclined to want to join you on the next stage of your sales cycle. So it's as simple as this. Look, if someone's not being warm with you, if they're not really buying into you, and again, this is nuanced stuff, okay? This is things where your kind of internal, your brain's going, I can just sense that this guy, I'm losing them. You can tell by eye contact if there's none of it. You can tell if they're, on their phone going, yeah, what, yeah, whatever. You're not there, or one word answers if you're on the phone and can't see them. But if you've got someone who's genuinely engaging with you, what tends to happen is that you will get a response from them. It might be a really good nod. It might be like they're nodding, oh, okay, oh, like this, like you're getting something quite effusive, taking notes if you're having a bit of a meeting. You can just sense if you've got them, if they're like hanging on your every word. That's when you move to your next step. Even more obvious, this is what I like to do, is look out for the verbal nod to move to the next step, which is them giving you some kind of compliment. That compliment might not be, do you know what, you're great at this, you're great at explaining this, I love you, Richard. It might not be that direct. It might be something like, do you know what, that's actually really helpful. Or I'd never looked at it that way before. Or actually, that could be really valuable. Something, that really helps. Whatever. If they say something like that, you can start moving to the next stage because you've earned the right. They are choosing to say to you, this is interesting stuff, this is useful. That's your cue, as I call it, to move on to the next level, okay? Oh yeah, no, that actually sounds quite interesting. Yeah, I think that could help actually. But this is because you're asking the right kind of questions. Which of these components that I've explained to you would be most valuable? Actually, I think that one would. Do you know what? I could see myself using that. I think that would be quite good. All right, now let's move to the next step. They're giving me permission to do it. So I'm looking for visual, but definitely verbal cues to actually get myself to that next level. That's what you must go on, not because you want to move to the next level. If someone's not that interested and you're now going to move to try and close them, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's it's old-fashioned and it's not intelligent to do this whole approach of, well, you just close them because then you get your objections. Yes, if someone's not sold and you ask them for a deal and they then give you objections, well, good, you've got the objections out. But if someone's like, look, I'm just not really that interested, yeah, look, can you hurry up? And now I'm going to try and ask them for a deal. It's stupidity. It shows that I'm completely lacking awareness of the vibe on this conversation. So when you hear these sales gurus saying, well, you should always close them at this point, and you should always ask them for a deal, because then you get the objections out. It's like, yeah, it's a tool, but don't try and close someone if they're clearly not interested. You're screwing up. So build some more value. Ask some more questions, get them feeling good about you, then ask for permission, ask for the deal. Because, as I always say, you've got to earn the right to ask someone for a deal. That doesn't mean saying, may I ask you for the deal yet? You have to actually say whatever you have to say for them to feel great about you, and then get that cue from them. Like, oh, actually that could be quite useful, Richard, thanks very much. Or words to the effect of, I'm quite interested. And you can then say, you know what, you seem quite keen on this, so here's how it would work. Now I can close. And yeah, they might have objections, but at least we're handling objections having moved to a close, and part of their brain's going, this is kind of logical to be in this place. Rather than going, is this guy mad? Why are they asking me if I want to go ahead with working with them when I clearly don't have any interest at all? So read the person, not the script, right? Read the person in front of you and work a bit more on the vibe of who they actually are. So hopefully that helps a bit more, but it's just a bit annoying when people go, no, you should always close regardless, and then you get your objection. No, you should close when when they're sounding a bit more interested because you've earned the right. Then you've got objections, then you handle them, and they'll be keen to help you do so. Okay, so rant over, but hopefully that's a bit more helpful. Daniel, you just pinged over a question there. Rephrase the earlier question. How do you draw others out of the planning phase and encourage taking action, especially when you're predisposed to distraction? Let me have a look. So how do you draw others out of the planning phase and encourage action, especially when you're predisposed to distraction? I'm a little unsure, I apologise, and because of time I will perhaps move on. You also asked, how do you create urgency without browbeating? Look, best urgency is natural urgency, when the person you're selling to feels compelled to do it, rather than you giving them a reason of your own to do it. Bottom line is this: most people try and create urgency artificially using personal reasons. So I really want to get this in today, so what we're going to do is this, or some made up obvious thing, like, oh, we've got a promotion on. I remember some guy once trying to sell double glazing for my flat when I lived in London, and he made out like coincidentally on this one day when I was meeting him was the only day of the year when they actually did an offer, and so I had to act now. I was like, man, it's too obvious, you know. So create urgency with natural, professional business reasons that aren't related to you personally, but are related to that person's world. So miss out because there's an exclusivity, involvement here, or miss out because, there is an offer, but it expires this week, and it's based on a particular feature or thing that person wanted. But never make it out just because, you want to try and get it in. Because if you make it out to be you're trying to just close a deal and get this thing over the line and get a signature, the person you're selling to starts to feel like you're less interested in building a relationship after a signature and focus more on just getting the sale, and that's not what they're interested in. So urgency really comes when there's a compelling reason why someone should work with you, based on something they might need and would fear losing, as opposed to because you personally want it. So don't bang about, don't bang on about how you want to get this in, or what you'd like to get it closed today, if we can get it done today. Give a good reason, give a business reason based on something other than what you want, and that will be a bit more effective, I find. So let's finish a couple more questions. So Kyla Austin has asked, when building rapport, do you keep the conversations short and sweet, or long as possible? That's a good question, actually, and it really depends on kind of what time you've got, but also it depends on the person you've got. When someone is really cold with you and unresponsive, I suppose. When I was doing a cold call to someone and like, what is it you want? I'm not going to spend a half hour trying to build rapport with that person. I kind of need to get on with the point. So again, I'm sensing the person here. But what I also was aware of was that some people want to talk. This is back to that personality typing. Someone who's social, they'll talk and talk and talk. I ask, how are they doing? When you start a phone call or something, and they'll be saying, I'm brilliant. How are you? I mean, I'm having a great day. It's been busy, but I'm really enjoying it. And you're like, wow, I'm not even saying anything. They're off. They're talking now. Rapport should last as long as it can, because the more you build rapport is just another word for connection, then the more you're building a connection. And remember, connection's the reason why someone's going to buy from you, really, more than anything else, more than sales technique, more than your product. So with a good connection and therefore good rapport, you're going to get somewhere. But don't beat a dead horse. You know, if it's the case that that person's pretty cold and unresponsive and rapport building is quite tough, well, as I said before, switch from emotional building of rapport to more practical level of rapport, which is really a focus on the likes of, look, here's how we're going to work, here's how it's going to happen, and you're going to help them out, asking them questions and then building value that way. Then when that person starts getting more interested, well, then you can add some more emotional rapport as well. But ideally, you want to chat as much as you can with them. You want to get on as much as you can, because as long as you can sense when it's going to start waning and, you know, you quit while you're ahead, then keep talking all you like, because actually that's you forging a great connection. And some of the best sales I've ever done are ones where we talk for ages because we've got so much to talk about. We kind of hit it off and we've got this great connection. Every moment I speak and build more rapport with them is probably more reason for them why they wouldn't want a discount, or more reason why they wouldn't want to negotiate with me or try and play any games, and more reason why they want to not just buy from me but be loyal to me, buy more in the future, maybe be upsold, tell their friends, and certainly spread the word about how great an experience it's been. So your rapport should last as long as it needs to, in the sense that every person you speak to will kind of have a bit of a they'll get to a point where they're like, let's just get on with what is it you want now. You kind of want to just stop short of that. And again, you can sense it. There's no rule, okay? You just sense it as you go. But tends to be, if someone is really chatty, you need to let them do it, and you need to, you know, be in there with them and enjoy it with them. If they're cold and closed, well, you kind of should get on with it, really. Okay, good question though, Carlo, thank you. Carolina Sheik has asked, Richard, what is the most important feeling we need to focus on when greeting, I think, when creating rapport, I presume it was. Yeah, so what's the, sorry, my own handwriting is terrible. What's the most important feeling we need to focus on when creating rapport? I feel that the most important feeling you need to create in the person you're pitching is that you'll like them. Okay, like, you know, you need to create this feeling that you're relatable, and that you're the same kind of person that they are. You may be looked upon, okay, by that prospect as a bit of a god, you know, like, wow, I can't believe I get an audience, because if you've done your marketing right, they're like, oh, I really wanted to talk to you, I can't believe I get to do this. But if you become relatable, they're like, oh, this is awesome, they're just like me. And it's like a superhero that's got a human element as well. And again, that creates the connection. You need them to feel like you are relatable, and then they are like you, and there are common threads. And if there's no way in which you resonate with each other, then the connection will struggle to be met. So practical terms, how do you do this? One thing is listening. Seriously, it's as simple as shutting the hell up and letting them talk, and then taking notes, and as they talk, as then you get back into the conversation, draw on things they've said to show you've been listening as well. It really goes a long way. And another way is empathy. Seriously, if you explain to someone that you've been in the same position as they are, if you have, obviously, and if not, then you talk about how maybe someone you know has been in that same position. You may even use that feel, felt, found technique. This is a classic sales technique of using the terms feel, then felt, and then found. And what you're basically doing is you're saying, look, I understand how you feel, I get it, I've been in your position, that's feel. And then you say, look, a number of people I actually work with felt the same. My clients felt the same when I first engaged with them. They also had whatever problem it is. But what they found is evidence. Now you give the evidence, but what they actually found was when they worked with me, this happened, which was really, really fantastic. So it's all very straightforward, but you need to listen. You need to think about empathy and really, really trying to demonstrate that you're able to resonate on their level. That's what they need to feel more than anything. Almost like you're going into a call thinking, I kind of need to make friends with this person. I need to kind of join up mentally with this person. It's not about a hard sale, because I've done hardcore sales. I've done it for years, and pushing them and being like the hard-nosed guy. It's a nice thing to display at times as a tool, but really, people buy people, and some of the hard-nosed business guys out there, they soften so much when you're on a human level. So they need to feel like you're resonating with them. That doesn't mean you're super touchy-feely. That's important to understand, because some people are. They're maybe all the social, certainly the emotional personality types, and some other people want you to resonate with them on more of a businessy kind of power boss level, and so you got to do that. So I'm not saying you got to be, oh, you know, how are you? I really feel the same. We get on really well. No, it's not always like that. It's the person you've got in front of you. Make them feel like you're similar to them, okay? And so, like I say, you don't have to lie about who you are, but draw out those particular traits that kind of resonate with that person. So hopefully that handles that question. I think there's a few more. Yeah, there were. So Matt Stephen Bailey has asked, what would you say to shy or introverted people to help them build rapport? That's a good question, because not everyone is built in the right way. I think in my natural state, I was quite an introverted person. I think doing a lot of things I do have helped hone the extrovert side of me. But really, you know, truth be told, I'm fairly introverted. And I think one thing you can do is actually just be upfront. Seriously, what's the harm in it? You know, in saying, look, just before you start, I'm actually quite a shy, introverted person, and so this is quite a big deal for me speaking to you. But let me explain why it is I feel this could be of value. And it's amazing. A bit of humility goes a long way, because what happens is you've removed any ego, so the pressure comes off this conversation. If it's a unsolicited or free, open call, that person you're speaking to won't. It's not about pity. They'll be like, do you know what? That's fine. No worries at all. We're all human beings here. It will really break the ice. So there's nothing wrong with being upfront with them as well. Bradley, thanks so much for joining in. I'm glad it was useful. 2 pages of notes. That's good news. How long have we been doing this? So 45 minutes isn't bad. And but yeah, so I would say tell them, try it. Experiment. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But look, just understand that they are people too. Understand that they are human beings. They might be shy as well. And look, whenever any new person meets up with another new person, it might be a little bit difficult, because you don't know what you're going to get. And so there's naturally barriers up, because that's how we're built. And it's important to break them down. But the best way to really break down the barriers is to think to yourself, why is it that I'm shy with certain people and not with others? Let's take an example. Why is it I'm shy with someone I've never spoken with, and really effusive and extroverted and totally confident with my wife? Why is that? Why really? It's because I know the person. If you put it into terms of leads in sales parlance, it's a warm lead as opposed to a cold lead. And we naturally would always prefer to speak to someone who is open to us, because we've validated that relationship. We know if they're like really going to shout at us and be horrible, or if they kind of like us already. So a warm lead's always preferable, because the emotional part of your brain that's like, I don't want to be rejected here, I don't want to get shouted at, I don't want this to go wrong, I don't like pain, because pain avoidance is a big deal for us. In fact, it's a perfect example of what you're actually craving, which is just that person's going to be all right with you. So what you need to do, I found this was a game changer for me, was when I was calling new companies, for instance, to pitch to them, I would always look at something that could turn that lead or that person I was speaking to into a warm lead. And it's a simple case of connection. So as much as is possible, you need to see where there is a connection. Where have you got something in common? So the connection with my wife is that we're married and we've known each other 25 years or so. So if that's the case, then I don't have to be nervous when I speak to her. Whereas if someone that's cold, I have literally no connection with whatsoever. I don't know, there's nothing to kind of bridge the gap for me. So if you've got someone cold or fresh that you haven't spoken to before, it's important straight away to try, ideally if you can, before you make the connection, before you call them or meet them, to see if you can find something that will connect the two of you. Because if you realise, do you know what? I checked you on LinkedIn, we've got a mutual friend. It's brilliant. It's perfect. One of my clients yesterday, who's running a business out of the north here up in Manchester, I was interested in hooking her up with another person that I know who works in banking, who's in LinkedIn. And if she contacted them directly, it'd be quite hard. But if she said, well, look, we've got a mutual contact in Richard, then life's a lot easier. So look at that. And so she's not going to feel as shy or introverted because she knows that, you know, things have already kind of been validated and that he's a bit more of a warm lead now as opposed to completely cold. So think on that. What could you find that bridges the gap, that creates some kind of a link already? And ideally it's a mutual contact or something you've got in common, because then that's a talking point. It breaks the ice a lot easier. But like I say, try that technique. There's nothing wrong with saying, look, I'm actually a bit shy and introverted, so this is a big deal for me having this conversation, but I really wanted to speak to you. I hope you got 2 minutes or whatever, you know, and then take it from there. You tend to find that they most people will soften if you try that. So hopefully that helps, Matt. Good question, thank you. Let's do a few more and then we'll go. So Lisa Main has said, Richard, I only sometimes have 10 to 15 minutes with my customers to make a sale, so quick rapport building is vital for me. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is you do. I think, if I remember right, Lisa, you're involved with yoga in some form, but I don't know entirely what it is that you do. Salvatore, that's a really good point, by the way, on that previous question. It's important for networking as well. If you're going to a networking event, try and find out who's going before you get there. Try and understand, you know, who it is they're, who it is they have as a mutual contact with you. Or if you're networking with someone fresh, even if it's just online, check out their profile, find something. Oh, we've got that in common. Life's a lot easier that way. It makes a big difference. But Lisa Main's asking here about building rapport quickly. It's the same. Seriously, I would always start with, hi, it's Richard Moore here. How are you doing? You know, the onus is on them to talk, because I want to remember earlier we talked about personality types. I want to get them talking so that part of my brain that works with feeling can tune in very rapidly to the type of person I'm speaking to. I can't describe it in words because it's not the language part of my brain. It's the limbic brain that is like, okay, I sense this kind of vibe. That's the kind of person I've got in front of me that I'm talking to. So get them talking. How are you doing? If they're like, I'm well, I'm a bit stressed though. What is it you want? All right, well, we've got this kind of person. Okay, fine. Or I'm really good actually. Thanks so much for asking. What brings you here today if I'm working in the shop? Or, you know, what exactly is it you're looking for at the moment in this kind of space? Oh, I'm just browsing. Okay, well then ask them the right kind of question that's going to open them up, because the more you can get them talking, the more you can tune into the type of person they are, and then you're away. But it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be focused so much on the practical professional building of value, when in fact someone might be quite chatty. You can lean more on the emotional, you know, how are you doing? Well, a lovely day, and that kind of thing. You can do that as well if they are that kind of personality type. So hopefully that helps a bit, Lisa. We should talk more about that, because I don't really know what type of business you run. It's hard to answer your question directly relevant to you. Isabello Pascual, I hope I've said your name right. Isabello has asked, how do you reframe an objection like, but I don't need your services, or I think your services are too expensive? Look, bottom line is, if someone says to you, I don't think you'll need your services, then you need to understand why. And the mistake at this point is to get aggressive or defensive. And a lot of people go like, oh, why? Why is that? Or even, you know, okay, can you tell me why? And that's a bit demanding in the tone there. So you need to be a bit more genteel about it and say, okay, I feel I must have missed something then. Be a bit more accommodating. I must have missed something. I'm really sorry. What is it that I've missed here? Because I normally, when I approach someone like you, it's a really good fit. What is it that I'm really missing? And if you get an answer, you tend to find the first answer is a bit pithy. So then you need to say, with a little bit of a laugh, you need to say, okay, fine. And what's the real answer? And what this does is it makes it approach things candidly. And it says, look, let's remove the whole pretense here. What really is the problem? And then they're more likely to give you the truth. And you tend to find the prospect then will go, well, do you know what? It's actually this. This is the reason why. And then you're away. So when you get a crap answer from someone, you say, all right, what's the real reason? And it does go a long way. But you need to find out. Simple as that. And the thing is, you've screwed up. If by a certain point in your call or meeting, someone says to you, you know what? I don't think that this is what is the line used? I don't think I don't need your services. it means you've missed the mark. And if you've talked too much, you've probably positioned yourself as someone who provides certain services that don't actually match. So you need to ask more questions. It may be that you're screwed up so much it's too late in the day for that. And then so the response will be, look, we've been talking now for 20 minutes and they're essentially saying, look, you still not got it, so we're going to leave it. You can typically sell to anyone, but you need to open them up and really understand why they might buy your product with good questions. Get the guy talking, and then you'll understand. And it tends to be, it's not a solution, but it tends to be that you don't get those responses, like I don't think we need your services, because you've been more consultative in the approach up until the point when they might have otherwise said that. Something like, I think your services are too expensive. Look, the word expensive is a subjective word. Expensive. I think Carolina Sheik, who asked the question earlier, you put in the thread when I asked to submit your questions, you wrote expensive compared with what, and that's exactly the right kind of approach you need to take. I would never say to someone expensive compared with what, because that's quite aggressive, okay? But what you do need to do is say, look, so you're saying it's quite expensive, so what is the basis of comparison here? What is this really being compared with? Just the way I dress it up, the language means I'm not being aggressive. I'm allowing them to kind of feel without pressure that they can give me a decent answer. And if you want to read any book about dealing with people directly, then one of my favourites is Mark McCormack. So he's the founder of IMG, is a big sports agency, well-known one, and I think he represented the likes of Jack Nicklaus and so on, the golfer. And his book's called What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School. My understanding is he went, but you know, it's true that if you learn theory, what you end up learning is kind of structure and strategy and things like that. But what you don't tend to learn in these places is how to genuinely interact with the nuances of how, you know, out of people and humans. And so if you say to someone something like, look, you're saying it's too expensive, but what really is the point of comparison here? That's the kind of thing he discusses in the book. Or being candid, like I said earlier, go, okay, right, what's the real reason? Or saying things like, look, the bottom line is this. I think there's a really good fit here. What would need to happen for us to work together? All these great techniques you should check out in his book. I think it's fantastic. But if someone says they think that your services are expensive, what it means is that they probably think they're thinking of something else. And therefore, seeing your product or service, they're like, well, that's way more expensive because comparatively this other one isn't as much. What you of course want to do is create a situation where they view your price as very impressive and quite low. So there's a technique you can try, which is quite early, like midway through your discussion, you can drop into the conversation. If a client has said to you, you know what, I love this product, it should be worth $20,000 instead of whatever, let's say for sake of argument that the product is $6,000. It should be worth $20,000. Then you move on, and what they'll have in their head is this seed planted that says, okay, it's not $20,000, but one of this guy's customers thinks it's worth that much. Wow. Okay, so it's not that much. It's probably a bit less, probably considerably less than that. They'll be thinking maybe more like 12 or 13 or something. Then towards the close, you can say something like, look, I'll be bringing the prices up soon, give them a good reason why, because you will be putting the prices up, and you know, maybe it'll be more in the region of $12,000, you know, in a couple of months' time. But the good news is we're not doing that. So now they're thinking, okay, some guy thought it was worth 20, they're going to be moving to 12 soon, and now they're going to be thinking, okay, maybe it's probably like 10 or 9 or something like that. And then you give them the price, but it's actually 6,000 for this, you know, to buy whatever it is I'm selling. You tend to find that because of the way you've positioned it, $6,000 doesn't then feel like a lot of money, because they've been thinking about 20 and then 12 and now 6, it seems like it's a minute amount. So it's about relatively, you know, it's about what they're putting your number up against. But if you just give them your price, you tend to find that if you've not really grabbed them with your value and sense that they're like, yeah, this is amazing, you tend to find that they may be comparing you with something else, and that's when they say it's too expensive. So you can avoid that in the first place by structuring your pitch or consultative call in that particular way. But the bottom line is just, again, get them to open up. Say, you think it's too expensive. Normally people are biting my arm off right now, so I feel I've maybe missed something. What really is it that hasn't grabbed you about this? Okay? And if they say, oh, well, I'm not really I don't really know, I think I just need to play around with it. You know, that's a crap answer. So you need to then say, okay, so, but what's the real reason? You know, with a laugh, and they'll probably be then more willing to open up. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Let's do one last question. So Danny Patrick has asked, how do you best handle awkward fumbles when building rapport? Yeah, I mean, if you're fairly new to sales, you might find that you're fumbling a bit, yeah, it's awkward, and that really puts you on the back foot. And you're like, oh, I don't like this situation, it's not very nice. And again, that's the human part of you, just wanting to move away or avoid the pain of feeling a little bit awkward. It's never a pleasant feeling, and that's because we're social creatures, as simple as that. And that's the thing that you've got to grasp if you're going to be good when it comes to sales with people. And so I think that, much like I said earlier, what was the question about Matt's question about what you should say if you're shy or introverted? You know, you could be upfront again, say, do you know what? This is a bit awkward for me at the moment. I feel like I'm just trying to get a handle on what I should say. And you tend to find with most people, they're like, you know what, don't worry about it, it's fine, you know, take your time. And I know that puts them in a position of a bit more kind of authority in the conversation, but you can soon switch it around because you're an authority on your product after all. But then they'll give you a bit more of the benefit of the doubt rather than just shutting you down. So you can be upfront and say, look, it's a bit awkward, I'm making a bit of a mistake here in explaining things, it's just because I really wanted to get in front of you, then move on. So humility can help a lot. Practice makes perfect though, right guys? So the more you practice, the more people are going to want to, the more you'll find that you're not making those kind of mistakes. But I suppose the main thing really is that it can get awkward and you can fumble around a bit if you're just talking too much. And certainly early on when you're building rapport, you need them talking. You need to try and bring them out of their shell. If there's one word answers, fine. More small questions just to get them answering and getting used to at least giving more one word answers. And then it's 2-word answers, get them to elaborate a bit more, drill down with more questions and getting them to speak. The more you talk, the more you're not allowing them to talk. And if you're not allowing them to talk, you're not allowing your brain to tune into the type of person they are. So you're not able to just riff knowing that they're going to be really excited about what you're saying, you know. So it's better to let them talk, because then you can really tune into the kind of person they are. Then when you speak, you'll know that it probably is tuned into that kind of personality, because your brain puts that kind of filter onto it. I make sure I'll speak to this kind of person in this kind of way. So you've got to let them talk more, and it will feel less awkward. Because also they then, in talking with you, they will give you more ammunition of things to say. You know, they will give you more pointers, they'll give you more hints about what's important to them. And taking notes on all that stuff means that it won't be as awkward, because I can refer to the things that were clearly, resonating with them. So hopefully that helps. The final question there from Leon Nandra: how can you tell when you're trying to sell to the unsellable? Yeah, I think that originally, when you're going into calls or meetings and things like that, you want to have some kind of, if you planned the meeting, if you planned the call, then you would know to research the person you're speaking to. If you are cold calling someone, you should have probably researched them, because you kind of know the space they're in or whatever. Some people aren't really sellable, and it's usually not because of your product, it's because probably of the space that you're within. And so you need to take a step back and kind of ask more questions around what you're doing. So let me give you an example. In 2002, when I started selling internet marketing, I had people I was pitching them as managing directors, and they may have had a website, but that's in the same way as even nowadays companies have a Twitter account, but you know, it doesn't get them anything because they post on it once a week. They have it because they think they should, and won't that work? I don't know, social media, they're kind of like that. Well, back then it was the same with websites, you know. So if someone was not sold on the internet, right, which sounds absurd nowadays, but genuinely, like back then you'd maybe buy CDs and DVDs and things like that. I mean, back in like 1998, 1999, I would have bought CDs and DVDs online, but most people wouldn't have done it. Honestly, people were like, whoa, that's really dangerous, isn't it? Do you know if you're ever going to get it? Because they preferred going to bricks and mortar shops, because then you can pick up the DVD, it's physically in your hand. But I was quite an early adopter there. So same there, 2002, you're calling out people, and if they're not sold on the internet, you're going to have a hard old time selling them on your website and the marketing you can do on it. So try and establish whether or not they're quite brought into what you're doing in your world, okay, before you try and sell them on your product directly. And you can get points, you can get hints as you go along, of course. But you know, if I was going to sell someone the 8-step startup course, for instance, I want to establish whether or not they're a very kind of tightly focused corporate employee that doesn't really believe in doing things for them, you know, in terms of building their own businesses. They're very much straight-laced 9-to-5 kind of person. I might have a harder time selling them the course compared with someone where there's much more need based on a buy-in to that kind of ecosystem within which 8-step startup course actually sits. So if they're an entrepreneur, they believe in learning, the kind of person that picks up a book rather than sits watching Game of Thrones in the evening to learn something, they're more inclined to be in that space. So I can tell or sense probably if they're going to be unsellable by testing in that kind of way. Obviously, sometimes you know if you're giving great value based on things they're saying they might need and they're just not keen on it. Some people are naturally, not naturally, that's unfair. Some people have conditioned themselves to be cynical and negative and pessimistic about things. They're not naturally like that. No one is. They've conditioned themselves to be like that over a number of years. And when they naturally have that, I don't think so, I don't think it will work kind of thing, you've got to look at yourself and say, well, do people normally react like this to me? And if they don't, move on, seriously. Because if you're doing cold calls, for instance, you don't have the time to spend half an hour trying to get someone kicking and screaming over the line to maybe buy your product, probably at a discount, when it's a lot easier just to crack on with someone who probably is interested. So you can kind of sense it. There's no deadline or set amount of time. Like if I've not got a sale in half an hour from this person, they're just booting them out of the shop. It tends to be more you can sense they're just not really that receptive. But always blame yourself first, not them. Don't think, oh, this person's unsellable, so, you know, because then you'll start using that as an excuse. Ask yourself, really, am I on my A game? Am I listening to what they're after? Is there a need that's established? Because if there is, and they're still not buying it, well, then maybe it's their fault. But if not, maybe I'm not delivering in the way I should be. So hopefully that helps. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in. It's been a real pleasure, and so much more rapport building technique is on the 8-step startup course, but it's also on the basics of sales course. So if you go to 8stepstartup.com, you can get hold of the course now, which is doing a great job of selling, and we've got a lot of wonderful people giving me lovely responses and testimonials, people who've been closing more sales because of the course. So it's 6 lessons. Check it out, see what you think, yeah, it's on it's on 8stepstartup.com, and the 6 lessons are all of my experience and the experience of those people I've engaged with those over the years, distilled into 6 lessons, one of which is connecting and rapport building. So this has been fun today. Thanks to everyone who sent through these questions. Thanks very much there, Daniel. The audiobook is excellent. That's very kind of you to say. And I'll see you very soon. On Monday, we've got the Startup Business Q&A. So if you've got any questions, then ping them over. But otherwise, have a great Thursday. Good luck with the rest of your week. Get closing the sales. Any questions you have, do ask me. But otherwise, I'll catch up with you really soon. Have a great day. Thanks a lot.